the Overman Warrior Podcast.
The Great Serpent watches over our dance.
We come in peace from the stars.
What brings you to our sacred ground?
We offer gifts in exchange for stone.
Hi, Rich Hoffman here. I was really impressed with a piece that Donna D'Errico, she does some YouTube videos called Mythbound, and I understand her, people like her. I feel the same way, and now everybody has their own media platforms. You can go out and kind of do these shows, and she's kind of doing kind of a Josh Gates, go study the mysteries of the earth kind of things. She did one on Serpent Mound, which I thought was really good. And before I get into it, I have to say I'm not going to make any friends with this one. And again, with my upcoming book, The Politics of Heaven, much like that, with all the discussion of Disclosure Day, the Spielberg film that's out, I think a lot of people are going to be thinking about these kinds of things much more than they have. So just as a reminder, my reference point is I love archaeologists. I think I like that they go out and they work real hard to dig up things so I can think about what they've dug up. But there's a section. Donna brings a couple of archaeologists out to Serpent Mound. They talk about Serpent Mound, and we're going to talk about why they're wrong. And I don't do it to disparage them. I enjoy their opinions. But like any science or any kind of institutional endeavor, people get into a groove, they stick to the groove, they build an assumption, and human engagement is a tricky thing. Not to call it laziness, but once you learn something, a lot of people are not willing to relearn it or learn more, accept new information as it comes in. They come up with a previous assumption, and then they stick to it all their lives, and then you can't trust what they say. And that's certainly the case when we talk about Serpent Mound. Serpent Mound is much more mysterious than a lot of people have wanted to give it credit for over the years. And the assumption is, well, it was built by indigenous people, which then becomes a political statement. Indigenous people being people who are here, who in the institutional sciences, they want to invalidate the creation of America by saying we took land, so stolen land can't have laws attached to it because it was never the land that was stolen. We stole the land from indigenous people, so therefore all laws, Supreme Court, the political system we have now, all needs to be tossed out the window. We need to remake it into socialism, communism. That's the push out of Europe. It's a long-held jealousy that comes out of Europe when you study these kinds of things. When the Louisiana Purchase occurred under Thomas Jefferson, and even the states picked up in the Pacific Ocean, such as Hawaii, Alaska, the western border states, California, Oregon, Washington, how England found itself wrestled out of the debate. And then we had this big, large landmass that generated this massive economy at the turn of the 20th century. And there was a lot of people who had buyer's remorse on selling that property or letting that property go to America. Spain had most of Florida and the southern states. And through lots of measures, President Jackson, who went against the banks, came along and acquired the southern states for us, and specifically Florida. So we have a big, giant landmass the world envies now that they'd like to undo. So there's lots of measures to do it, and through institutionalized global science, you see the footprints tiptoeing through the paint that they painted themselves in a corner with. And you get a little bit of that here. And these archaeologists that Donna has, I think, respectfully brought out and had them talk to her about the Serpent Mound, why the Serpent Mound is so great, and I'll talk about that here in a minute, because the Serpent Mound is one of my 3 key features when I talk about how do you prove that alien interaction occurred and started human existence. Of course, that's not going to win you any friends in the scientific community. Says that's preposterous. Talk about alien interaction. I think that the evidence is overwhelming. I have 3 different sites that I'll talk about in a minute, Serpent Mound being one, that proves it. So before we do that, let's talk about the controversy. Let's listen to this very respectful interview that Donna D'Errico, I hope I get her last name said right. I know her as Donna. Does a nice job going around and exploring mysteries. Her YouTube videos are pretty good. This one she did on Serpent Mound. I know Serpent Mound really well. So it struck me as particularly potent. So let's listen to her.
Ceremonial sites.
This is really, I think, interesting.
Okay, that makes sense.
This is kind of an interesting view. Most people don't see this because they're facing this way when they're walking down this path. But when you look at this view, you're kind of at a low spot.
Right.
So you can see the interesting interplay of all these different angles. But I like to point this out because when you're seeing a picture of Serpent Mound, you're usually seeing a map or an aerial photograph, and it seems two-dimensional. And when you're on site like this, experiencing it the way it was meant to be experienced, you see that it is actually very three-dimensional, and that the landform itself is that when we first came in, there's a large green
Serpent
space
Mound is
between
deeply
where
mysterious.
We first came in.
It's a
and the
wonderful
aperture. And
archaeology
underneath
site.
that green space
And we should be
are the
doing a
remnants
lot
of
more
a village
work.
from
Wow.
And I want to support these
Oh,
guys.
wow.
which is
I want
also
archaeologists
when
like
we think
him
that's evidence
to get a lot more money for
This is
funding.
Size, accuracy isn't really part of the idea of
It's
something.
just symbolism.
It's like,
I want to
it's like,
read their
you know,
periodicals. I want to read their
Expressionism or
books.
Impressionism.
So, why was this built? Is it like an astrological alignment to things, or?
Well, there is an astronomical alignment here that was very important to the Fort Ancient culture, that they have alignments at other sites to the summer solstice sunset as well. So the main alignment here is
Now, she's
that.
being
So
very
are
respectful.
there Native Americans
I think
that are
she leans in the
associated with
direction
site
where I
today?
do.
Yeah, we think
She likes mysteries, and she understands that there's a Graham Hancock subplot to all this. That the site is much older, and it
And
looks
I
like
guess
it predates.
The one question I
right
have
here.
is, why is there so much mystery surrounding the Serpent Mound?
Part of the reason why that mystery persists to this day is that we have to think about how American Indians have been talked about and how they have been treated in history.
See,
if we think
a
about
pre-assumed-
when Europeans first came to the shores of North America, and they are encountering in some places active mound building traditions, or they're encountering burial mounds and things that are not unlike the ones we have in Ohio. There's no great mystery at that time as to who built them, because these people
It
of
was
European
them.
descent are seeing it
That's
happen,
the only people who are here.
or they're at least seeing American Indians are caring to these places, venerating them as the graves of their ancestors.
Right.
Early explanations, people might say, oh, they must have been built by a lost tribe of Israel, or fallen angels from the Bible, or ancient Egyptians, or Phoenicians, or Vikings,
Giants
or
and
giants.
aliens. And,
Yeah.
Right.
Today,
I'm one of
these
them.
things are still with us, but it's giants, aliens, and Atlantis.
Okay.
A lot of people in those colonies believed in what we would call mound builders. And mound builders...
I've heard that.
It's a word people say, but historically the idea was that mound builders were some advanced civilization that built places like Serpent and some of our other sites, and that they were killed off and that they were replaced by American Indians. But that is also, in effect, a justification for the colonization of places like
A
Ohio.
political assumption
You
that
could
he's
say,
using
well,
archaeology
this land doesn't belong
to validate.
to these people. They took it from someone else, so it's okay to take it back. So
See?
this myth about mound builders is used to justify the removal of Indian peoples. And it is used to justify the Indian Removal Act passed by the Jackson administration in 1830. And that is almost the exact same moment, the moment when the indigenous people have been forcibly removed from their homes, that any attempt to really document and explain these things really begins. And that effort continues for a very long time. But for nearly 200 years, Native people have not really been part of that conversation.
Okay.
We work to change that. Our organization works with many tribes. We consult with nearly 50 federally recognized tribes to make sure they're part not just of the interpretation of these sites, but in all aspects of their care and management.
I love it here.
Okay, and she's very respectful, and she brought some archaeologists out to talk about it. They let her take a drone up, which they really don't like. They've closed the place off to Graham Hancock. I've gone to Serpent Mound for decades, and my thoughts on it, I guess it's one of my 3 sites that I say, as I talk about my book, The Politics of Heaven, or we're talking about Disclosure Day, the movie, Spielberg movie, and then, of course, all the releases of interactions that we've had with, let's say, aliens. A life form that is not part of the sovereign United States, and not even part of the sovereign Earth. They've come from outside the planet, and we've been told for years that that's crazy. But the evidence is pointing that direction. The overwhelming UAP evidence is now magnificently overwhelming. And for a long time, I've listened to guys like these archaeologists, and I read about them in periodicals like this, and I'm thinking, they live in their academic bubble, and I like that bubble. I understand that bubble, and I like people like him, like this archaeologist. And I understand Donna going out and getting their opinions. And I know a lot of people in the legislature of Ohio, and I encourage them. A lot of them love ancient aliens. You'd be surprised. There are some very prominent Republicans in the current state house of Ohio that love, pretty much as I do, the Ancient Aliens TV show. And we've watched that for years, and archaeologists like this guy look at that and say, where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? Where's the evidence? The evidence says that we have to validate, and I have inside knowledge of this too. When he takes his position up, and you're part of an Ohio bureau that's trying to pull together academics, and I have a real gripe with academics. There's a site near my home called the Middletown Mound. It's on government land. It's sitting right out in the open. I'll put a picture of it up at the beginning of this video. And that's because my daughter is very interested in it, one of my younger daughters. It's a magnificent site. Totally been back in the late 1800s. It's a very large mound. If it was anywhere else in Europe or something, it'd be a tourist attraction. People drive by it. By my house, they don't even know it exists. There's another one up the river. I live right on the Great Miami River. I mean, I'm in an RV right now in my driveway at the moment. My RV travels all over the place. I could step outside my RV and throw a rock and almost hit the Great Miami River from my house. Up the Great Miami River towards Dayton from where I live is the Miamisburg Mound. It's a magnificent structure. A lot of it goes back to the Fort Ancient type people that they're affiliating with, but the evidence points that the Native American peoples, just like at Cahokia, sites like that they embodied, they saw previous sites, just like the Romans did at Baalbek, and just as many cultures have in Jerusalem. There was already temple complexes there, and they built their cultures on top of them. That's happening aggressively all over the world right now. The Christian church has put churches on top of previous pagan sites everywhere. So it's naive to think, if you read enough of this stuff, and I do, and I love them, archaeologists who write in periodicals like this one. I respect what they do, and I want to see them get more money. I'm an advocate out there wanting to see them make more money, get more money. But behind this guy's statement is I have to go to the bank and get a loan for a dig, or my university does. And I have to go down and talk to local Mr. and Mrs. Banker. And I know a lot of bankers. I know how they think. They don't have a particular love of Andrew Jackson, the president, who was a Democrat at the time, and he went to war with the banks. And they love to go out there and disparage the Indian Removal Act and say it was unfair because it fits a political agenda. There's a lot to all that. Now, was it nice to pick people up and move them somewhere else because they were in the way of Western expansion? I refer back to Teddy Roosevelt's books on winning the West. Teddy Roosevelt invented the Progressive Party So good luck on that. I read his books years ago. Love his books. Love Teddy Roosevelt as a president for talking about the morality of Western expansion. And very much that's kind of where we are today. And there's an element out there that is jealous that America grew into the great superpower that it did because it had embraced capitalism and an open economy where anybody could have upward mobility, and the class system wasn't going to be enacted like it was in Europe. So Europe found itself on the outside looking in on these things, and now they're trying to poison institutionalism through finance to corrupt the idea that America should have been formed. And then they get fixated on a period and say, well, the mound builders were very sophisticated. That's proof that we should never have removed them and that we should not have had westward expansion because we had eliminated advanced culture. There's no proof at all. No one knows who the people of Cahokia were that built the complex city of Cahokia just outside St. Louis, or Serpent Mound. Serpent Mound could have been there much longer, and the Adena and Hopewell Indians and those types of people came along and said, this is pretty cool, let's build a camp here. And they built a society there because there was already something significant about it, and they wanted to attach themselves to it. The same kind of debates I had in my book, the Politics of Heaven, where I talk about Ashland evolving for their own safety into the Aztec Empire. And why were they so brutal? Just go to the Three Rivers petroglyph site and look at the origins of the people who would then become the Aztec people a few centuries later, south of the location. This is in New Mexico, very close to where we launched the Trinity site, the first nuclear bomb. And Roswell occurred in New Mexico, of course. There's lots of things going on in New Mexico. But if you go to the Three Rivers petroglyph site, which I talk about extensively in my book, The Politics of Heaven, you see how these ideas evolve from the Anasazi to the Three Rivers people, to the shaman cultures interacting with spirit deities through psychedelic experiences, and then how those become the formation of new countries like the Aztec nation, the empire, migrating from the north to the south into central Mexico and forming advanced cities. And Tenochtitlan, the very advanced canal city that is underneath current Mexico City. There's a lot that still needs to be understood about that. And then these cultures were here a long time ago. And when we talk about indigenous people, of the three locations I talk about that kind of prove that humanity is much older and had interaction with gods, I would say not Yahweh, God of the Bible, God, Father of Jesus, but bearers of supernatural technology that they came and brought mathematics, which is reflected in Serpent Mound. And the three sites I have is Serpent Mound being one of them, and I'll explain why. The Wendover people of Central Florida, right next to Kennedy Space Center, there's a very advanced site, 8,000 years old. I've talked a lot about the Wendover people, but the short story is they had very advanced rituals and knowledge of things that came from somewhere that you can't trace it. Current archaeology doesn't understand it. And when you trace biblical archaeology that says, hey, I have a Bible, and here's archaeological sites that correspond to the written testimony. And we can put the two together and say, hey, here's an historic narrative. When you start talking about things that go back 8,000 years ago, you're going beyond the biblical narrative, because it's only a couple thousand years in the BCs in the past. The Bible is remarkable in that historic text survived, validated by the Dead Sea Scrolls. Quite a remarkable discovery that I have a lot of reverence for. Now you have all kinds of sources that can back each other up to say, here's a validation of an assumption. These guys don't have that when it comes to indigenous people. They want to say, to back up political backing so we can get more funding for our projects from banks that don't like Andrew Jackson. President Jackson and his war against the banks, against banks having centralized control of all finance, and therefore undermining our constitutional authority of running our own country. centralized banks have always been looking to coalesce the nations of the world under their control, under central financing. Clearly, if you've ever studied J.P. Morgan and the Rothschilds and the not just the Roosevelts, but the Rockefellers, Vanderbilt money, like I've been talking about with this new wave of the space economy. If you watch the SpaceX IPO, it'd be very similar when everybody was building railroads during the westward expansion. So Roosevelt's attacks against monopolies, while he also cheerleaded westward expansion, is kind of a duality that you find in similar characters, such as President Jackson, who I admire a lot. I mean, he got a lot of duels. He had a lot of bullet holes in him. Bullets were rattling around in him. He had so many bullets in his body from duels from people, because he was that kind of guy. I love that kind of personality. He had so many bullets in him that they say he rattled when he walked. I don't think it's quite true, but he was every bit what he said he was, and he went to war with the banks. The banks and centralized authorities, anybody attached to the Fed today, and I know a few Federal Reserve people out there, they're not particularly happy about Andrew Jackson. They don't like Trump for all the same reasons. Trump is a lot like Andrew Jackson as far as presidents go, and yeah, we wouldn't have Florida if not for Andrew Jackson. And the Indian Removal Act, Indians weren't playing particularly nice with the incoming European settlers, and they removed them so they could have a civil society. Now, politically, you could say, well, we should have never formed America. And there's a lot of progressive groups out there, and these kinds of archaeologists in the field. You spend 12 years going out and getting a PhD, maybe longer, probably longer. You spend a few $100,000 getting there, and then you got a job caretaking for the Serpent Mound, and some young lady like Donna comes along, is asking you questions, and you get a media platform, and you want to refute all the stuff Graham Hancock's been saying, and all these conspiracy theorists like me have been saying. They read the articles. I've been writing articles about Serpent Mound for decades now, and my thoughts are that there was a race of giant people that inhabited North America a long time ago. They were interacting with aliens, alien technology, and that was the seed for a lot of development. And I'd say even going back to the Wendover people, the way that they buried their dead, how they came to know about preserving bodies in bogs, they had help. And we're naive to think that we were the only ones in the world and we were born a certain way, and the Smithsonian migration models are what we have to bend science to. And these guys are bending science to their assumption, which helps them get funding to stay afloat. And they go talk to Indian tribes that are only a few hundred years old. They're not exactly ancient, and they designated they were indigenous because they didn't want to consider that there were people here before building these mounds. They want to associate the mound builders to these Indian cultures and say we consulted with the elders of those Indian tribes that aren't that old. Their roots don't go back to the Wendover people 8,000 years ago in Central Florida. Yes, the Wendover people look like they came from Beringia. They came across the land bridge. They migrated that way post Ice Age, but they don't genetically. They're not genetically attached to any Indian tribe in the United States that we currently know about. So how can he make that statement? They want to assume that so they can make a political validation that the Indian Removal Act was bad. We treated the Indians horrible. And they're playing the Indian music there in the background to say this is an ancient North American indigenous people site. America should have never been formed, and look what we did to them, and look at the great science they had. Where the real evidence points to, hey, look at all these UAPs, and these guys have been interacting with this for a long time. The government's been covering it up, just like the government's covered up a lot of things. And they haven't been forthright about what indigenous people were and the people we pay to go out there and do sites and do explorations in archaeology. on sites like Serpent Mound aren't coming to the right conclusions. They're leaving evidence on the table. And Donna, being super nice to these guys, is pecking around the surface on it a little bit. They were nice enough to sit down with her and get on camera, and she's being very cordial with them. But she knows, we all know, there's more to that Serpent Mound site, and my argument would be, well, how did these people who built Serpent Mound know to build Serpent Mound there? And this is, and people would say, well, where's your proof? Well, where's your proof that these people, these indigenous people were indigenous people? When you know genetically through DNA checks now that there were people here much older than them that don't connect, and they have a total history of all their own, and they had rituals that predate the Bible by many thousands of years, and we haven't studied them enough to be able to draw any conclusions. You certainly can't say that the people who built Serpent Mound were indigenous people. They might have been there during a period of time when we interacted with them, and they might have had some knowledge that they cascaded from time and history, but if you study their mythology, obviously they had some interesting backgrounds with interesting people that we no longer have any contact with. And that's part of the story, and why I say Serpent Mound is so important. So I would say, is there more going on? And when Donna says nobody knows why Serpent Mound exists, I think you have to go back to alien contact. A group of living creatures that has high technology from other places in the solar system, the galaxy, and the universe, that has figured out how to move through time, call them interdimensional characters that don't work within our dimensional space, time being one of them, and have figured out how to move around. For when we say that, you would call Marty McFly from the Back to the Future movies and Doc from Back to the Future interdimensional characters, because they're traveling through time. They've invented time travel. The book, the great book from H.G. Wells about time travel. That would be an interdimensional character who's figured out ways of traveling through time to get either in the future or the past. If you leave Earth and you go to a planet, and there's planets in our own solar system, as soon as you leave Earth's gravity, time is different. People, if you're on the International Space Station, and when we start going to Mars and hanging out on the moon, time is going to move differently for people in space than it does on Earth. That is a form of interdimensional characteristic. So when we talk about interdimensional beings, we're talking about beings who are traveling in a spatial reality that isn't held to tethers of time. Time moves in a consistent fashion on the spherical planet of Earth, and all the gravity and its place in space and around the sun, and all the forces that entail that, which a lot of occultists have attributed to astrology, which is certainly part of all this. You have Serpent Mound built with the astrological alignments that are highly advanced. And I would say the proof is that in the mathematics of them, and knowing what we know about UAPs now, and that we've had these interactions with cultures, that we've actually interacted with biological specimens, as testified officially on Capitol Hill, which I just came from Capitol Hill, so it's not a conspiracy theory haven. It's a lot of straight, narrow people who work there and listen to this testimony, and these are serious people. These aren't conspiracy theorists. And now we know that there's, in the conspiracy to cover up our government, very similar to how these guys might find the Indian Removal Act to be detrimental to removing people that were at this Serpent Mound site in Ohio and Tennessee, and removed them, put them out in Oklahoma. How dare that Andrew Jackson, President Jackson, for doing that? How dare President Trump for removing aliens that are just trying to come here from Mexico, because we built our entire political platform as Democrats on immigration. illegal immigration. And the banks out there want to control centralized banking. So, of course, they're going to poo-poo in history and sciences if they control it in your education system. That President Jackson was horrible because he put a war out on banks. He put a war out on centralized finance. And the Federal Reserve System that we have today is highly illegal and would never be accepted if Andrew Jackson was in office. We don't want another Andrew Jackson ever. And we don't like that Trump is so close to the kind of president that people would pick. So we don't trust democracies. We're going to rig elections. We're going to control the narrative everywhere we can. And we're not going to give any of these guys money for their digs unless they buy into our political assumptions, which is what I see going on there. So can you trust what the archaeologists are writing if they're going to write anything and say anything just to get a buck so they can stay employed? No. And that's what the big conspiracy is. And now we're finding out Disclosure Day, which I think is a significant, as I said, coming out of there, I've avoided talking about these things for years because, I do a lot of serious work in a lot of serious ways, and I interact with a lot of very serious people. And the counterpoint to that is, well, you can't go talking about aliens and Bigfoot all the time. However, and I talk about it in my book, The Politics of Heaven, it's one of the chapters. I was at an event just about a month and a half ago. I was at an event with Congressman Warren Davidson, who I love. I like Congressman Warren Davidson a lot. Very serious people. And I don't think he'll mind me saying it. I was with George Lang, Senator Lang. I was with Vivek Ramaswamy and many others. We were all together. And what do you think we were talking about? We weren't talking about Vivek Ramaswamy winning governor of Ohio. All that conversation came up because I literally just 2 days before came out of Governor DeWine's office. I was talking to Governor DeWine about something. So when I say I'm talking to serious people, that's what I'm saying. So you don't typically talk to them about serious policy issues, which is what we typically talk about, serious policy issues, and then turn around and talk about Bigfoot. But at this event, what we were talking about? And I'll tell you where it was. It was the Dinkle House in Westchester. We had a little side room, and snacks were good. Everything's great. Thanks for the Dinkle House for putting on such an event. And then we had a little get together to talk about strategy. And very serious people were there. But you know what they all want to talk to me about? Because they know I talk about these. They know I'm into this stuff. All the side conversations were with me? They come, Rich, what do you think about all these Bigfoot sightings in Ohio? Because at that time, just north, and Donna covered them, she actually went to those sites where the Bigfoot were discovered, and she went and camped at the sites hoping to find Bigfoot. That's why I like her. She puts out some great stuff on her YouTube, and she's very inquisitive, and she's at a place where she's like, you know what? I see all these other people doing these videos and doing explorations in the paranormal. Why don't I do it too? Because I'm kind of doing that a little bit. You see other people doing it, and you're like, no one ever quite gets it right. Josh Gates, he sort of gets there, but to play nice on TV contracts, they stay off the controversies. He's steered away from UFO talk. He used to much more talk about it in the old days, not so much anymore. It's more about dispelling them than embracing them. But, we're in the age of disclosure, and now you have government whistleblowers coming out and saying, hey, yeah, it's real. Yeah, I worked on alien bodies. We're not talking about a Discovery Channel episode anymore or something on Netflix sponsored by Obama and John Podesta and Hillary Clinton. They all want disclosure. And now you've got a former Democrat and Trump in the White House as a Republican. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to declassify all this stuff because I'm tired of hearing about it. And now it's all coming out. And I've seen this trajectory going for a long time. I started writing my book, The Politics of Heaven, a few years ago after I had a UFO experience, a real one, which I talk about. And then I've been to this thing, and my conclusions are that these guys, most of the Indian legends, the Native American legends I've read about, including those of the five nations, the Iroquois. And if you've ever read the Frontiersman series by Alan Eckert, which deals with settling the West. They're wonderful books, and you get to know the Iroquois really well. You get to know the Shawnee really well. I know the Tecumseh very well. I know Blue Jacket really well through those books, and I've read lots of work on them. And you look at where they get all these ideas about gods that are so similar to the Canaanite gods of the Near East or of the Orient. Why are they all so similar? And if you've ever read some of the Hindu Foundation books, stories, it's all about UFOs. And I go back to Zachariah Ascension. I always thought, it always bothered me that Graham Hancock, and I think about Graham Hancock because he's done some great work, and I'm sure Donna has been inspired by it. That's why she was at Serpent Mound. Graham Hancock's done some great stuff at Serpent Mound, and of course these guys hate Graham Hancock for poo-pooing their, and I'd say Graham Hancock is an indigenous people argument. He definitely, he has a big publisher, he's got a big name, big agent, so to maintain those things you typically have to kind of yield a little bit of ground to more these archaeologists' point of view than to shake it up. More the Smithsonian point of view, like pointed out, where they put in assumptions out. They write periodicals that they're known for, and I love them all. I love these guys. They don't even know it, and I'm saying stuff that's going to make them hate me. But you know what? The evidence doesn't point where they say it is, and the evidence doesn't point that these mound builders got all this advanced mathematics that was already here when the greedy, evil Americans came and ran them off their land. That's not the story. The story was aliens came here and settled a lot of these civilizations, and you can trace it back through their myths and Indian legends. And if you trace them back far enough, you come to the conclusion that they had help building their societies, as most cultures around the world did, which is why there's such uniformity all the places in the world, because you had these characters, these life forms, moving around and shaping these civilizations around their interactions. And the evidence of that comes from the 3 sites I mentioned. One being Serpent Mound, 2 being Wendover, and the third one being one in England called Flag Fen, which I love the work of Francis Pryor and the Time Team guys in England. I think America needs to have an archaeology program like them. I think Francis Pryor is the kind of standard, the gold standard of archaeologists working in the world today. And I love his work at Flag Fen. But you know what he did? Just north of England, London, England. Out there, this is away from Stonehenge and Avebury and all the things people typically associate with. We talk about the foundation stone that the entire city of London was built around. We talk about the Flynn idea of everybody in time building all the cities of the world centralized from the temple in Jerusalem. Okay, so if the temple in Jerusalem, the Temple Mount, where Abraham sacrificed Isaac, or Ishmael was to be sacrificed by Abraham, founded the Islam. The Dome of the Rock location, the sacred stone where all that was happened, where the Ark of the Covenant was supposedly set, and they built the whole temple around it. Well, what's interesting about Flag Fen is just an hour north of London, in a bog at the time of the first temple period, so 1000 BC. There were people who had advanced ideas about the afterworld. They built a village on top of a bog with all these advanced platforms. Very complicated stuff, and this was not information transferred through the Romans, who later would occupy that region, the Roman Empire. They would never know anything about Jesus Christ or Yahweh, the temple in Jerusalem. They wouldn't know. But at the same time period, they were building a very advanced culture that would throw their weapons over into the bog as a sacrifice for the afterlife. They had a concept of the afterlife. And I would say that even though none of these sites point towards extraterrestrial influence, a collection of them do. When you consider Flag Fin site in England, and then the foundation stone in central London, and its distance and why it was placed there to begin with. No one knows where or why. It's currently in the financial district, close to the Tower of London, if you want to go see it. And they built the kind of the town around it, the city street. It's embedded into the side of a building right now. But it's been there since before London was ever there, and no one knows why it's there. But it has some interesting mathematics in relation to the temple in Jerusalem, which then indicates coordination of cities and how cultures rose and fell across planet Earth. Paris is another one. There's a stone in front of Notre Dame that all of Paris, all the city streets of Paris radiate out from. And then when you also, I booked The Politics of Heaven. I talk a lot about Washington. I've been to Washington a number of times, and I've had personal tours arranged by political friends that would give me access to things that you normally would. And my whole investigation there was the Masons. One thing I had to do is go down to Alexandria and see Washington's place, because Washington was a big-time Mason. Masons, I think, believed in a lot of this kind of paranormal, extraterrestrial influence as it came down through Hermetic society. Roots trace back to Atlantis. And that's not conspiracy stuff. I mean, the belief was Egyptians. Masons have a lot of reverence for Egyptians. And if you've ever seen Egyptian culture up close, they certainly got their ideas and influences from pre-civilizations of Egyptian society that point back to Atlantis, because Plato learned about Atlantis through the Egyptians, and Egyptians learned about it through years and years of prehistory prior to the rise of the pharaohs, their pharaoh order. And we talk about Egyptian society, you talk about pyramids, and I think there's a lot to talk about as far as pyramids and the Sphinx, and we know of secret panels under the paw print of the Sphinx, the small head. That wasn't something before. How old really is it? Is it much, much older? And when you start looking at Göbekli Tepe and some other sites, and you start looking at some of these submerged cities that are off the coasts of our coastlines, including the Wendover people in Florida. So when I'm talking about some of these spectacular things, and people are like, what? He's talking about aliens settling North America and Atlantis? He's a crazy lunatic. The evidence is going to flush out, everybody. I'm just telling you. And as I came out of the movie Disclosure Day, and I keep these things in the back of my mind, and yeah, when I was with that event with all those, I'd say, high-level politicians, and we're like talking about, hey, what's Governor DeWine saying? Hey, what's going on in Ohio? What's the temperament in Columbus towards this? What do you think the polling is for that? Serious topics. And then they were like, what do you think about those Bigfoot sightings that were out there in Amish country, just to the east of Columbus? I'm like, okay, you're talking my language, Bigfoot. Let's talk about the serpent in Lake Erie. Let's talk about the frogman in Loveland. I saw another episode that Donna covered that one, and I think it's a little alien dude that comes and goes from that region, and probably because of all the Indian mounds that used to be in Butler, Hamilton County, Loveland, along the Little Miami River there. The Great Miami River, again, across outside where I'm presently at, there's a big giant Middletown mound that has had the top of it excavated. And I will tell archaeologists all day long, archaeologists like this guy, hey, go get yourself a grant to go dig into it. They can't get it because of the Native American Repatriation Act. Says that any bones you find, you got to give back to these tribes. And these tribes aren't even old enough to really be accountable for the bones you find. But because politics has seeped in, and central financing controls all politics, and central financing has a narrative they want to maintain control over human civilizations, it's all about control. It all comes back down to control. And why conspire to not tell us about all these aliens coming and going, and that we don't have sovereignty over our airspace, and that we've interacted with them. We've just right up the road, up the Great Miami River, up at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, We have alien specimens in coolers that, and yeah, I know retired colonels from that base, and I've asked them about this. So I feel very confident that, yeah, there's biologics at Wright-Patterson. Yeah, there's been reverse engineering that's gone on at Wright-Patterson, not just from shot down craft of our enemies here on Earth, but also of craft that exists outside time. And I'll come back to the time thing in a minute here, because time is a dimension. And anybody who's an astronaut can start to be considered to be an interdimensional character, meaning you live between time and space. And I know that's a hard concept for a lot of people to get their mind around, but it's just technology. It's just a perspective. So the reason why the Serpent Mound site is so significant is because it exists on an impact crater that occurred 300 million years ago. And the scar had eroded away that much. The one that's out in Arizona that's so popular, I think, is only 60-some million years old. You know, so given another 200 million years, it's going to erode away into almost nothing, just by erosion. And in this part of the world, Ohio, that region survived ice ages. The glaciers never really came down that far, but it's an impact crater, and they built Serpent Mound on it, and it has all these astronomical alignments that are very precise. And what do they mean? A lot of people have contemplated it, and to my, I've read all the books on it. I love the work that Ross Hamilton's done on it. A lot of great people have written a lot of really good books on Serpent Mound and the mysteries of it. And Donna's pecking on it here, and she goes out there because I'm sure she thinks like I do about a lot of things, and she's like Graham Hancock, probably been inspired by all the same people. We've all read the same books, and she's at a place in her life, she's like, you know what? I'm just going to go do it. I don't see anybody else going out and doing these episodes the way I want to see them done, so I'm going to do it. So she brought some archaeologists out, and she got an archaeological point of view, which is great, and I love them, and I love them for the same reasons I go and read this, and I love going to the Smithsonian. I love reading what they think, but they need more evidence to think what they think. And you can't just draw a line in the sand and say, this is a political fact and we're going to stick everything to it to make the finance people happy, which is essentially what it comes down to. And it's not rooted in fact. The impact crater issue, for these guys to build Serpent Mound, mathematically, it's pretty impossible to say we're going to build the largest effigy to a snake in the entire world at a particular spot. And at that time, there's no way that a native people, indigenous people who came from Beringia, would know 20,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, hey, there's an impact crater from some meteorite that hit here. Let's build a very complex mathematical effigy to celestial bodies. Let's just do it. And then, by the way, let's go hunt some rabbits and deer. There was a deeper significance to it. And the mathematics were given to them by interactions, trading partners, let's call them that, with other cultures. And who are those other cultures? Well, we're getting a hint of that now that all these UAP files are coming out. And as I came out of the movie, Steven Spielberg's movie, and my wife was reminding me, because I'm always very careful. Like I said, I go to these important events and I talk to important people who are very smart and very well placed and very respectable. And you don't come out and start talking about aliens, ancient aliens, Eric von Däniken, and Bigfoot. But I recently did, and I put it in my book, The Politics of Heaven. And as I put it in there, I'm like, man, it's going to be hard to get like normal New York publishers to take this serious, because everything in it, it has 21 chapters, and 19 of those chapters, I would say, are highly controversial. Not wrong, but excessively controversial. Like the most controversial, like the most controversial book you've ever read I have a chapter dedicated to just those things. And I don't feel bad going on a limb on it. I think it'd probably take 20 years for civilization to catch up to it, to catch up to the statements. And I usually, when I write a book, I write it for longevity, not for the immediacy of a media market who's looking. How should I vote today? I'm in a central committee. Who's the person we should endorse? Yeah, I get a lot of people who want to know that kind of information from me. But when I write something significant and I talk about these things, obviously I've gone on for almost an hour on this one. And I didn't mean to. I meant to keep it like 12 minutes. This is my target time for these things. But once you start talking about it, you can't stop because there's so much. There's so much to discuss. And I think really there's hundreds of hours of podcasts that need to be done on this. And I'm doing this so that I can get people thinking in that way. And then there's infinite amounts of topics that you can spawn off here and turn into hour-long episodes all their own. But yeah, the politics of heaven, I would say, out of the 21 chapters currently that I have that are completed, 19 of them are the most controversial chapters in literature that have ever been put to paper. And it's driven by my love of archaeology and Orthodox science and the Smithsonian and guys like that, like Donna's interviewing there, that I think and have a lot of respect for, and I want to see them get funding. But I want to see them take that funding and go over that mound across where I'm at the Great Miami River and go dig into Miamisburg and the Middletown Mound. And I want my politician friends to drop this whole NAGPRA thing, Native Americans Repatriation Act, because we have proof that the Indian tribes do not correspond to that Beringia group in Florida, the Wendover people. And what's significant there is at that time, 8,000 years ago, the sea level was 450 feet lower. So for 15 miles to the east of where Kennedy Space Center is now, which of course the coast comes right up to, it's a space coast. Our family has a condo complex down there on the Space Coast that we all love a lot. I know it very well. I know the area very well. There's a really nice pizza place that we just recently had while we watched a SpaceX launch, and it was one of the best days I've had in 2026. It was great. And I love the Space Coast. But a lot of people, when you go into the place and you order a pizza and everybody's there getting some beer and they're watching sports, and I think there was a soccer match on when we were in there, and everyone's talking about who was going to win that soccer match. And my joke with soccer is always, well, you can watch it for 90 minutes and it could still be 0-0. Where American sports force you to, they have very rigid time measurements that force you to score something somewhere. There's lots of ways to score so you don't have a boring 0-0 score. Very boring European concept, soccer is. Anyway, we were watching a soccer match and people were talking about soccer. And I was talking to somebody about the coastline. And I was telling them, 8,000 years ago, because Wendover was on my mind, 8,000 years ago, 15 miles that way, I point out to the ocean, 15 miles that way, you wouldn't have been able to see the ocean yet. You would have had to go 15 miles for you to get to the coastline. So on that old coastline, underneath the current water, are Indian mounds, ancient civilizations by the Wendover people. If you go onto the Gulf side, that's the Atlantic side, of course. If you go to the Gulf side, for 150 miles into the Gulf of America, if you go from Tampa, if you've ever seen Tampa when a hurricane comes through and it sucks all the water out of the bay, you can see how shallow the bay really is. And so is the coastal waters right off Clearwater. 150 miles. You could drive for an hour continuously off the coast of Florida out into the Gulf of America towards the SpaceX complex at Boca Chica, and you would be on dry land 8,000 years ago. And there's a lot of archaeological sites that have not been excavated because it's marine biology or marine archaeology. There are large cities and pyramids that have been seen with LiDAR all over South America, Central America. Miramar comes to mind. And all over that whole Gulf side of Florida. There's giant pyramids. There's bones in those pyramids there's a lot of evidence in it, and you can almost bet that they're going to date to 5,000, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000, because we know from Wendover that there were people in the region and they had advanced textiles. They could make shirts almost as complicated in weaving as this one 8,000 years ago, and they would bury their dead with their heads craned to the north, facing west. For a reason. This is way before the Bible, way before anybody was talking about Yahweh in some sort of narrative. So who are they interacting with? And we're starting to get a sense of that when you start looking at mythology, why people believe what they believe, and these UAP sightings. And as I walked out of that site, or that movie, Disclosure Day, and my wife's like, well, what do you think? It was pretty good. I said, but you know what it did? This movie gives me license to talk about these things, because this is Hollywood for its own reasons, government for its own reasons. I would say the COVID conspiracies, the election fraud conspiracies, the January 6th conspiracies, the desire to change the narrative has brought this all about. Spielberg supposedly got his idea to make this Disclosure movie. Now, he's received, what's significant about Disclosure Day is Spielberg, as a high level, he's a multi-billionaire. I mean, he's richer, I think, than President Trump. So he's very wealthy. And you get a certain freedom with that kind of wealth that most people don't ever enjoy in their lifetimes. And that's to not worry about some financier coming along and cutting you off, or telling you, hey, we're not going to fund your dig, or you're not going to do this. Spielberg's made Universal Studios a lot of money. He's made a lot of people in the industry a lot of money. Barack Obama was on the film set for several times, and he was president, and he knows. Trump had to chastise him for trying to come out and sneak secrets that he knew. He found out when he was president. And, presidents, the big dirty secret is when they come in, they're presidents, they're elected by the people to go represent people's business. The military-industrial complex tells you, hey, no, you're a president, you don't need to know. You're on a need-to-know basis, and you don't need to know. You're going to be out of here in 4 years. We're career lifers, the CIA and FBI and the sub circles within those circles. We're lifers, and we've been sworn to secrecy on this stuff. And yeah, we've worked on advanced biologics of people who are not from this planet. We've worked on them. They're right pat, just up the road from where I live. The conspiracy's been out there forever, and where there's smoke, there's usually some fire, and there's a lot of fire. And when you go to, in my book, The Politics of Heaven, started in the museum of the Mothman Museum in Point Pleasant. I was so enchanted by it that I said, like Donna here, going around interviewing all these cryptids, I came away from that and said, I think it's time that I do this book. I had a UFO encounter myself, and my conclusions on it I've talked about elsewhere. And it's all about power and understanding power and how that gets concealed from people and why it is. And the same kind of nonsense has given archaeologists like this a very limited set of circumstances to work from. So they basically get told, hey, you want your doctorate degree. I mean, obviously, I'm thinking very seriously about going and getting my doctorate, to be honest. I haven't, because I don't really see it as useful. At this stage of my life, when you're in the career builder stage, what's it going to do for me? I mean, I already do advanced stuff. I work with a lot of people who have PhDs every day. Almost every hour on the hour, I'm talking to somebody who has a PhD, at least a master's, advanced degrees, and in most cases, several advanced degrees. But I've been thinking about it because I've been wanting to talk about this subject, and unless you have a PhD, it's hard to have people take you serious. And I've been seriously thinking about going and just doing it just to get it off my mind. But after I had my UFO experience, I sat down and said, this is something worth talking about. I'm going to sit down and write the story. And I wrote The Politics of Heaven, and I'm shopping it around now. If I don't get it through like traditional, and not that people have been adverse against it, I just know that with 19 very controversial chapters, the chances of a publishing house getting behind it the way Universal Studios got behind Spielberg on Disclosure Day is pretty hard. You got to remember, Spielberg is a multi-billionaire, and Universal Studios will eat out of his hand, so he commands a certain respect. And he had Obama on set with him. So this movie is basically saying all the things that they've known for years. It's come out in little movies like E.T. and movies like Close Encounters. Definitely started to see the cracks coming out in movies like Indiana Jones and The Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which I'll tell everybody is one of the better. They say it's not a great Indiana Jones film, and there's lots of weaknesses. It's definitely not Steven Spielberg's best movie. Let me tell you, there's some controversial stuff in that movie that's significant. The ultra-terrestrial bit, and I promised I'd come back to that, and I am. I'll come back to the time travel stuff. Because I think this is what we're dealing with. If you gain the ability as a civilization to travel, and we certainly are doing it, SpaceX has given us the ability, but give us another couple hundred years. Could we travel the way that some of these UFOs are traveling now, that we're seeing these UAPs? Could we bend time and space and travel and defy physics? I think, yeah, we're close to it. And I think because of some of the controversies that are out there, I think Spielberg, to preserve the Democrat version of the world with all the niceness that they're wanting to talk about, and let's treat aliens as if they're immigrants. Let's make an immigration case out of alien species as a throw it at the fan and see if it sticks. Last-ditch effort of progressivism. So let's tell them everything we know, which is what they did in Disclosure Day. And Obama, because it was classified information, he can whisper to Spielberg. Spielberg, because he's very rich and he has Universal Studios that will do whatever he says. They're all desperate.
From Earth, time flows normally. But for an astronaut in space, moving further from Earth's gravity, time passes slower. On Earth, time flows at a steady pace. The deeper into space, the near a black hole, gravity warps space-time, slowing time dramatically. At the galactic center, time nearly time itself.
Perimeter secure. Moving subjects to the lab. Confirm non-terrestrial. Commence full analysis. Note the cranium.
Anyway,
Document everything.
On Universal Studios, a lot of conspiracies happen in 2020, and methods of holding those conspiracies and utilizing them to withhold information from people, like they did with lockdowns and COVID. You see the same patterns with this kind of interview on indigenous people and the origins, the narrative. We're going to create a narrative, and then we're going to use marketing to sell it to mass populations and hope it sticks, and it just doesn't stick because the evidence has a point there. Going back and then saying, well, now how do we cover up what happened in 2020 and get people to think about something else? Well, let's go to the aliens and throw the public a bone and let them know what we've known all along. And then tell that story. And so I think when I was coming out of the theater for Disclosure Day, that's what I was thinking. I was like, okay, here's a guy, it's 80 years old, Steven Spielberg, making the movie he's always wanted to make, telling what he's always wanted to know. Finally, he's in a position to do it. No one's going to tell him no. Universal Studios weren't going to say no because they all got wrapped up in all these conspiracies, and now Trump's in the White House, and he's releasing the documents, so they're going to make their movie. And they told basically what they knew from their point of view, a Democrat point of view. And it turned out to be a really good movie, and I enjoyed it a lot. And like I said to my wife, I said, well, this gives me license to talk about this stuff in ways that I haven't felt I could talk about it for the previous decades I've been doing all these things. And it's not just one of those things like, hey, well, let's talk about polling, let's talk about fundraising and state segments, precinct strategies. Oh, by the way, Bigfoot has just terrorized a mom and her kid just to the east of Columbus, out in Ohio. Those things typically don't go together, but now suddenly they do. So I promised I'd talk about interdimensional characteristics, or ultra-terrestrial, multi-dimensional characters. So if we took off right now, as we will in a few years with SpaceX, and you start going on starships into space all the time, you're going to come back to Earth with reduced years. If you spend time in orbit, if you spend time on a space station, if you're going to a Hilton, floating around the Earth or on the Moon, a Marriott that's on the surface of the Moon, or Mars even, and you stay there for a month or two, you're going to come back younger. Time moves differently at different places. So, of course, these characters, if we went to Jupiter and you go to areas, a lot of people came to understand this, and this is Kip Thorne physics. He brought this up to fascinating effects about black holes. The movie Interstellar, where a planet that was really heavy had very dense gravity, very near a black hole. Every second was many days on Earth. And you could have if you spent 10 minutes outside your spacecraft in that gravity, entire life would occur on planet Earth. Lifetimes, your kids you left behind that were infants when you left, they'd come back, they'd be dead. They would have lived entire lives. That's certainly, I think, one of the problems with interstellar travelers, and this is one of the arguments I make, and I make it in my book, The Politics of Heaven, that the mound sites and their alignments to alignments isn't so much, it's for people to know when they are, not where they are. Because you don't know when on Earth, if you're coming back and forth, and you're like talking to some indigenous people at the Wendover site, and you're saying, hey, here's how you make a textile. Here's a certain way to use a rock that you can skin a fish with. And then they're like, what? I don't understand that. Let me go home and get a pencil. So they get in their spacecraft and they fly off. They fly to their home planet. Let's call it Sirius B. Very heavy place. Definitely gravity dense. And they come back. They pick up the pencil. They come right back. And many thousands of years have transpired on Earth. And they're like, hey, where's that guy I was going to give that pencil to? Oh, he's dead. He's in that bog over there. He's been dead for years and years. Well, where'd he go? Where's his soul? Where was the occupant of that vehicle? How can I speak to him? Can I resurrect his essence somehow? And this is where a lot of these ideas come from, I think. And it's just as conclusive as these guys saying that Americans arrived here, indigenous people were building mounds. It's the same kind of observable evidence. You can draw any conclusion you want, but I think this evidence is much more conclusive than what they're saying. It has a lot more validity to it because Serpent Mound, they built it on the edge of a crater. And how do you know that there's something going on? Well, some people were interacting. They were coming back, and people were there, and they're like, "Hey, guess what? You know that we were last here 300 million years ago. We just flew out and came back a few minutes ago. For time for us was 5 minutes, but 300 million years passed on this spot, and this was an impact crater of a meteor. You ought to build a cool thing here, like a serpent, or a reverence to us, to honor those who have given you all this great technology and understanding. Serpent-looking beings. Oh, okay. Let's build a testimonial to you. So we'll build a serpent mound on the edge of the crater. We know something significant happened here because you told us. We didn't observe it. You told us. They cascaded over time. So as we start traveling into space, we're going to find out that time is a difficult thing to manage when you start getting away from the Earth's gravity. Because you're gonna go and come back, and people that you left when you took off are going to die during the transition, and you might be only gone 30 or 40 days, and for them it's 400 or 500 years, and it's going to be really hard to deal with. And that's one of the problems with the complexities of interdimensional beings. Interdimensional because they're manipulating time. They're manipulating length, width, and height, which you do in aerospace, but you're also manipulating time. So that makes you interdimensional. It makes you dealing with time in a way that Marty McFly was an interdimensional character because they were traveling in time. And you can become a time traveler just by going into space. So now that we know aliens have been coming and going for a long period of time, now you got to start thinking about how they manage time. How did they tell time? You got to start putting yourself in their shoes and understanding every time they left and came back, it could have been thousands of years on Earth. And a lot of things changed for them. And they had to have some way of knowing when they were. And their readouts on their craft probably wouldn't have a way of doing it. Just like if you're going through a forest, if you've ever done, now people use GPS to kind of tell their way around. They don't do it the old-fashioned way. But Hansel and Gretel left markers for themselves. And if you've ever been on a trail that's hard in deep woods and you want to know how to get out, you'll tie ribbons or leave some rocks on the trail. So, hey, I know I came through here. The old ways, before GPS could really walk you through it, you have to leave yourself markers on trees or leave rocks behind on a trail so you know which way to go. I would propose that the primitive constructions of things like Stonehenge, and then again, this goes back to archaeologists I respect a lot, Francis Pryor. He did a lot of great archaeology. I got a book of his at Stonehenge. But if you're a character from some other place and you're wanting to know when you're here, what time is it? You leave yourself markers that don't erode over time. You leave yourself markers like the London Stone or Stonehenge or Baalbek, or just pick your Avebury site, Serpent Mound, and then you could go out there at night and see how the stars align, and you know through calculus, okay, that's where this star is at, that's where that star is at. I know what time I'm at. I know what time it is here. So one of the proposals I have in my book, one of the controversial chapters. So I could probably go on about this for a long period of time, but it's provoked because I highly respect archaeologists. I think we need more of it. I think we need more of these guys telling these kinds of things. But I think they're desperately naive in their assumptions, and there's a lot of politics in their conclusions. And that Spielberg came out with Disclosure Day, not as a tied conspiracy to the Trump administration. I think they all got caught on the COVID conspiracies, and they're trying to get everybody to forget about it, so they're letting the cat out of the bag to change the narrative. And it's a good way to do it. And I think it's a good narrative to talk about because it just changes how we view history completely. And I think it changes those guys' lives completely. And that's why I've been thinking about going to get a PhD in this stuff, just so I can have the authority to talk about it. But then leaving that movie Disclosure Day, I think they did a lot of the heavy lifting for me because now we know what everybody's always talked about. We've always suspected it. And I think now an institutionalized sector of our economy, Hollywood, even if it were rooted in a cult and all kinds of crazy nonsense, they've come out and said, yeah, we can put our name to this. Our top talent, Steven Spielberg, and his multi-billion-dollar value, we'll put it behind our movie studio, Universal Studios, controlled by central banks that want to maintain control over the population through finance. We can let this much out because we got burned on these other things and we want to distance ourselves from that story. So we'll be happy to have aliens, and it goes back to my whole belief on aliens anyway. My UFO encounter is all about power and control, has nothing to do with truth as it is, or an interaction with a mysterious entity. It's all about who controls what. And the aliens are just one more life form in that power struggle, which is the theme of my book, The Politics of Heaven. Coming out soon to a bookstore near you, and I think a lot of people are going to have fun. But yeah, this is a long one, and it had to be, and I could actually go on for another 20 hours on these topics. I could talk infinitely about these things because it's infinitely fascinating. There's a lot to talk about, especially about cryptids. And now that we are admitting things about the official disclosures, it changes the way you view history. So that means you go back and analyze history with fresh eyes and a new approach, which I find very exciting. And I'm sure Donna does too. She's picked a good time in history to do these myth myth-bound episodes on her YouTube channel. And I think she's going to have a lot of success with it because there's a lot of fresh perspectives that are needed, and a lot of people are stuck in the past, like this poor archaeologist. A narrative that's now way outdated and needs a fresh perspective and a lot more input. Anyway, it's Rich Hoffman here. There's a lot more to talk about, and we certainly will. Anyway, if you ever read my book, The Gunfighter's Guide to Business, I think you'll love it. Anyway, have a good day, and much, much more to come. And see you later.
In the age of disclosure, you must understand the politics of heaven. Coming soon.
Coming soon, the politics of heaven in 2027. A treasure hunt through heaven and all human history.